Hi there. I live in Iowa, and in Iowa we have a lot of corn and a lot of beans, and that means there's a lot of things for deer to eat, and we have an excess population of deer in Iowa. The Department of Natural Resources generally just has seasons in the fall where you can do archery season, or you can use a muzzleloader, or a shotgun, or a low-powered rifle. But since this year they had such an extreme population, extra population of deer, they opened a new season. So it's been field dressed, and now what we have to do today is we have to take this. We have to take the skin off, and then once we reach the neck area, then we'll remove the head, and then we'll be able to harvest the meat off it at that point. I mean, at this point, you could get inside here. There are they call them the tenderloins. They're the inside the rib cage. There are two strips of meat inside the rib cage. They're called the tenderloins, and they run long ways. There's also a duplicate type of a muscle on the back side of the rib cage, but you have to get the skin off to get that, and that's called the back straps. They're also a sort of a tenderloin, but it's the most tender meat on the deer and most desirable. And some folks that shoot deer specifically just go for that, and that's really what they're trying to harvest off the deer. What I'll be trying to harvest off this deer is, of course, this deer was shot, if you can see it, it was shot up here in the upper back. Generally, you're trying to shoot the deer around here. This is where the heart is, and the internal organs. Then down here you have the intestines and so forth. There's a diaphragm that separates them, but generally you're trying to shoot right about here. This one was shot high, and it might have caused a little bit of damage to the backstrap. That's okay. We'll deal with that. But I want to harvest any additional backstrap that's on here. I may get some rib meat off of this. I haven't decided yet. I'm thinking about experimenting with smoking some deer ribs. I've never tried it before. We will get some roasts off the back, and we'll get some grind meat off the lower part of the leg, and also we might get some meat off the front of the leg, a little bit off the neck. But we're going to try to get the big chunks of meat, and we'll run it through a grinder. I generally mix it with, we usually mix it 50-50 with pork fat or lard, as it's called. We generally get a pig every year butchered, and so we asked for the meat from the locker, so we've got our own fat. We'll just mix that together. We have a KitchenAid grinder. You don't need to be fancy with this. You just have to mix them together and get it ground down to the consistency you want. We do a single grind for chili meat, and we'll do a double grind for hamburger, things like that. All right, so I guess we'll get started. One thing I'll note is that generally it's a lot easier to peel the fur off if the animal's warm. I'll be honest with you, I've only been doing this is my third year processing a deer. The last 2 years I shot a deer, and I started shooting deer in 2021, I guess it was. So 21, 22. This is from 2023, well, technically 2024. So one thing about doing this is that you got to have a sharp knife, and this fur will really dull your blade pretty quickly. So I've got a steel. I just bought this on Amazon. It had really good reviews on it. I'll put a link in the description, so if you want to see that, you can. But this is just a Cutco pocket knife that I bought. Actually, I got it as a gift, and I absolutely love it. So you're not supposed to sharpen Cutco. You're supposed to send them in and have them sharpened, but with the pocket knife, I'm going to sharpen my own, and I keep it pretty sharp. Now, I did have another one of these, and it didn't function properly. The locking mechanism failed. So I sent it in, despite having sharpened it, and they sent me a new one. I just had to pay for the shipping costs. So I've been pretty happy with the Cutco product here. It gets pretty sharp. So I will be using this to take the fur off, and then we will be using a Cutco deboning knife to be harvesting the meat. So there we go. Now on this deer, see, you have the bone right here, and then right here, where I have the hook through, there's a tendon here, and you got to be really careful not to cut that tendon, because if you cut that tendon, then your whole hanging mechanism fails. So as you're taking the fur off, you got to make sure that you do not cut that tendon, or else, which I did one year, and it made it really difficult to work with. So anyway, I'm going to start out here. I'm just going to try to get an opening. We have an opening. And you have to try not make sure you don't cut yourself as you do this, because that would not be good. Now I'm sure there's professionals out there, the guys have been doing this whole life, that are going to know all the tricks here. I don't. I'm just kind of intuitive. I mean, I had my neighbor taught me how to do this, and he's a veterinarian. He's the one that actually talked me into trying to go deer hunting. He says, you never know. You might come a time when you need to go and get your own food and, you know, literally eat what you kill and feed your family. So I thought it was a good idea, good advice. So that's why I started deer hunting. I'll be honest with you. I'm not a huge fan of you know, killing things. I don't like it too much, but you know what? I eat this, so I don't feel like there's nothing wrong with what we're doing here, and it's actually good for the conservation of of other deer and the health of the population of the deer, because if you have too many deer, then they start getting they have diseases that they spread, and this overpopulation has a lot of things that go along with it. So, all right. So now I've got this leg cut all the way around. This chain hoist is really handy when it comes to doing this, because I can these things are pretty heavy. I don't even know how much this thing weighs. I'm gonna say this deer probably weighs, I'd say probably 120 pounds. I'm not the strongest guy in the world, but it does feel like about 120 pounds. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in here and we're going to trim this skin off here. We're going to trim that all the way down to the opening. Alternatively, I could go from the bottom up. All right, well, let's see, we're almost there. A little membrane there we have to get through to open that up. Okay, great. So now we've got the leg opened up, and we can just start pulling that back, peeling that back. There's a piece of meat there I cut into. Ideally, I would have probably started up a little bit higher here, but it's okay. So now we're just gonna trim that back and start peeling the hide away, just like that. We're going to pull that all the way off the leg. Does tend to be fattier than the bucks, because before the hunting season, the bucks are in what's called rut, and that's when they're, you know, in the fall or late fall, early fall, I guess it is. It's breeding season, and so they're chasing those does around. They're trying to get a nice herd that they can be the daddy for, and so they're all, you know, when you shoot a buck, they're not going to have much fat on them. But these does, they're just little queen bees, and they're just going to sit around and eat corn all day, and they're not, you know, they kind of get fat. Just got to kind of trim and pull at the same time, and it'll come right off. Here we go. The thing about this is a piece of deer fat right here, and deer fat, you do not want to eat it. You know, if you have a nice, you know, beef steak, you know, if you have a, you know, a tenderloin, or if you have a ribeye, or you really do enjoy having some beef fat, because it just has a great flavor to it. It renders down very well. It's a good thing to have in your. You would like to have some marbling in your steak. A lot of people do, at least I do. But with deer fat, it does not cook well, it does not taste good, and so it's not desirable. So as we process this thing, we're going to be removing the fat, any of the fat we can. We're going to be pulling that off. Yeah, it's coming right off now. Yeah, that's looking good. Okay. Okay, I'm going to do the other leg now. What we're going to need to do is we're going to need to pull this all the way over the tail, basically we're going to pull the tail inside out. So we got to do both these legs, get them going, and then we're going to pull all the hide off the back. Basically we're going to do the same thing we just did on the other leg. Make sure we don't cut that tendon, because we need that so we can keep cutting this thing up without having to do it from the ground. It's just a real pain in the butt if you cut that tendon. I learned that the hard way, unfortunately. It has been brutally cold. Last week was brutally cold, and even into Sunday it was probably at night it was down to 5 below or so, I think, and it was just miserable. But today, yesterday and today have been, even though it's really foggy and hazy, we have all this snow on the ground. So, but it's 42 degrees today, I think, and so all that moisture in the snow is melting, and it's evaporating into the air, and it's causing it to be very, very foggy. But I'll tell you what, I love not being so cold, because it's been brutally cold, and just everything's been a challenge when it's this cold. It just, everything seems to break, and it kind of, you don't want to leave the house. It makes life a little difficult when it's so cold. Trying to get around this tendon without clipping it, because that just ruined your day. I think I'll do that just fine. We're gonna stick my finger underneath that hide like that, and I'm just gonna cut down from there. And I'm gonna keep working my way down without cutting my finger off. It is pretty cold. It's not frozen, but it's a chilly carcass. There we go. Almost got it. You know, when I'm doing this, I'm thinking about all the different things I could have been when I grew up. I could have been all kinds of different things. It's a profession, and I just imagine those guys that are butchers and they do this all the time. And I just think it's so neat that they develop a great skill around doing this type of work. Those guys at the locker are just masters at, you know, taking this stuff off, and they're so quick about it, and their knives, they know how to sharpen a knife so it's razor sharp. It's just amazing. Get that knife out of my hand. There we go. Okay. Okay, we got that leg going. Now what we're gonna do, I'm gonna crank this thing up, and we're gonna pull it over the tail and keep working it. Okay, that should be high enough for now. We'll see. Pull that back. Yeah. Come right off. We're gonna have to trim around that tail. I'm gonna sharpen this a little bit again. Keep the edge on it. Sometimes you can get the tail all the way out, but not always. There we go. I left a little puff ball at the end. Oh, that's funny. And we just peel it off. Trim some of this away, layer of fat inside here. We're gonna have to remove a little bit of muscle in there too, I think. Just, we have to disconnect that. coming off. A lot of fat in there. You see all this. We're gonna have to trim all that off before we, you know, as I process the meat. I'm just gonna throw those little scraps in a bucket like that. And like I said, that fat's not good for eating and it doesn't render down well. I'm just kind of having to cut, just make little slices here and then pulling as I go. And it's coming right off. You know, you think this would be really dirty, but if you look at my hands, they really aren't that bloody. It's not that, you know, you might think it's a gross thing to do. It's not. My hands are getting cold. At least it's not 22 below out here like it was a week ago. Continuing to work through this. Definitely not alone here. I got all these barn cats right around here. They're looking for something to eat. They're pretty good mousers. Sometimes I don't see them for several days, so they got to be eating something in this cold weather. All right, so the legs. The legs are interesting because the front legs, they have meat on them. But you know that nothing holds the legs on except for meat, just for muscle. One thing that holds their front legs on is muscle. The back legs are held on by bone. It's actually connected to the hip. But up here, this is not connected to anything. So once we get that stripped down, the front legs are just gonna come right off. We're gonna be able to pull those off with a couple little slices. And it's amazing. It's amazing how these guys are created. Are you helping me, Boots? Thanks for your help. And we're not gonna pull any roasts off the front. We just get rind meat off of this, so I'm not too worried about if I happen to cut some meat. It's not a problem. Okay, so here we're gonna harvest the meat off of that. And then we'll discard that when we're done, but we'll go ahead and cut the meat off of that. We'll just be able to continue on down. Time to get this leg. If you could do this, you could probably butcher your own cow, or you could definitely butcher your own hog. It's the same concept. I've never done that, but I have to say it has to be very similar. All right, so we got this over the leg. I think I'll leave that attached for now, and when I'm ready to process the meat off there, I will pull the meat off. I'll detach that and I'll cut that up separately. And there's the deer skin. They aren't very soft, you know, when I feel it. They're sort of a kind of a coarse hair. You know, they're not all soft and fluffy like Bambi, I guess, but that's in case you want to know what they feel like. Well, there's our hanging carcass, and I guess next time I'll probably come out here later today and start harvesting the meat off of it. I'll have to go get my table set up and we'll get rolling on that. If you like what you see here, please subscribe and like this video.